What would you do if your 12-year-old daughter was kicked? Yes, kicked by the very person meant to protect her at 300,000 feet. What if that moment wasn't just an accident, but a judgment on who she was, where she belonged, and the color of her skin? This story begins with a seat. One simple seat. A place a child had every right to sit until someone decided she didn't. In that instant, the world handed a father a choice: stay silent and keep the peace, or stand up and let the truth echo loud enough to break a system wide open. And now, I want you to imagine something. If it were your child, your grandchild, sitting in that seat, what choice would you make? What would justice mean to you? Because this story isn't just about a flight. It's about dignity, about belonging, and about the quiet courage of a child who never raised her voice, yet changed everything. If you're ready to feel, to remember, and maybe even to heal, let's begin this journey together. And before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on emotional stories like this one. The first thing Riley Johnson noticed that morning wasn't the warmth of the sun leaking through the airport windows or the buzz of passengers rolling luggage across the polished Seattle-Tacoma floor. It was the quiet, a kind of quiet that only existed at airports before dawn when the world hadn't fully woken up yet. She liked that quiet. It made her feel less like a kid tagging along on an adult world, and more like someone who belonged in the spaces grown-ups walked through without thinking. At 12 years old, Riley was used to traveling. Her father, Marcus Johnson, was a name people mentioned in the kind of business articles grown-ups pretended not to read, but secretly adored: a tech visionary. A CEO who built his empire from nothing. A proud African-American man who climbed what many said was a cliff, not a ladder. Riley never really thought about any of that. She only thought about one thing this morning: the seat her dad booked for her, one of first class. "You're flying the way your mother always wanted you to," Marcus had told her with a soft smile when he dropped her off. Comfortable. Safe. Respected. He always emphasized that last word. Respected. Riley carried that with her like a fragile treasure. The boarding process was calm. A few business travelers shuffled through, eyes, tired coffees in hand. A couple with matching backpacks. A soldier in uniform. And then Riley, small, brown-skinned, quiet, clutching her book and her mother's old smartwatch around her wrist. She stepped into the cabin of Flight 918 to Nashville, inhaling the gentle scent of citrus cleaner mixed with that familiar airline air, sterile, cold, recycled. She paused to look at seat 1A. Wide, clean, a soft, gray leather seat that looked like it was waiting for her. But someone else noticed her too. A flight attendant stood at the front, Linda Hale. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, uniform crisp, smile thin as a razor. Her eyes flicked to Riley's boarding pass, then to Riley's face, then back down again. Her smile vanished. Riley offered a small, polite one in return. She didn't get one back. Linda stepped forward. "Sweetheart," she said, but there was no sweetness in her voice. "You're in the wrong cabin." Riley blinked. "No, ma'am. My seat is 1A. Linda's jaw tightened just enough for a grown-up to notice, but subtle enough a child might think they imagined it. "That seat," Linda said slowly, "is for first-class passengers." "I'm a first-class passenger." The sentence was simple, steady, factual. Riley wasn't defiant. She wasn't rude. She simply stated the truth the way her father taught her, without apology for existing. But truth had never bothered Linda as much as the person who spoke it. Her eyes hardened. "Give me your pass." Riley handed it over. But Linda didn't scan it. She didn't even read it. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a cool whisper, a whisper sharp enough to cut. "You kids never know your place." Then, it happened so fast. Riley didn't even have the chance to gasp. A sudden sharp impact struck Riley's shin. A kick, hard, precise. So fast and so deliberate that Riley staggered, grabbing the edge of the seat to keep from falling. Pain rushed up her leg. Her sock, white, folded neatly the way she liked, began to bloom with red at the cuff. A thin line at first, then a stain. But no sound left Riley's lips. Not a scream, not a cry, not even a whimper. She just swallowed, her throat tightening, eyes stinging. She forced her feet to stay planted on the floor, willed her breath to stay even. Her father always told her that strength wasn't about not feeling pain. It was about not letting pain decide who you were. Linda straightened, brushing imaginary dust off her uniform, as though the little girl she had just struck was simply an inconvenience she'd had to physically remove. Back of the plane, she snapped. Now. Riley blinked up at her. But now. Her voice cracked like a whip. A man in the first row peeked over his newspaper, then quickly pretended to be deeply engrossed in an article he hadn't been reading. A woman 2 seats down shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward Riley, then away, as if afraid guilt might be contagious. A teenage boy 2 rows back lifted his phone at an angle. A soft red light blinked. He was recording. Linda didn't see it. Or maybe she didn't care. Riley pressed a hand lightly against her shin. The fabric of her sock was damp, now warm and sticky. She swallowed again, harder this time. She reached for her backpack, slinging the strap over her shoulder. As she did, Linda took her boarding pass, and tore it clean in half. The sound was small but cruel, a sound Riley would remember for years. Counterfeit, Linda declared, letting the pieces flutter into Riley's lap like discarded receipts. You people always try something. Riley's heartbeat thudded in her ears. You people. She had heard that before. She had seen how adults said it when they thought kids weren't old enough to understand. She understood. She always understood. Riley took a slow breath the way her mother taught her: inhale through the nose, hold. Exhale through the mouth. Calm. Keep your calm, baby girl. The world will try to steal it from you. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply gathered herself, stood up, and walked toward the back of the plane. One slow step at a time. Her leg throbbed with each movement. Passengers shifted to let her pass. Nobody spoke. Not one person reached out. Not one grown-up said, "That's wrong," or "Are you okay?" The silence was heavier than the pain. As Riley moved through the aisle, someone whispered, "Maybe she snuck up here." Another murmured, "Her parents should teach her where she belongs." Riley kept walking. When she reached row 32, the air smelled different. Tighter, more crowded, less forgiving. A man with a large frame and the strong scent of whiskey slumped in the aisle seat, his hoodie stained, his face tired. He looked up briefly, then groaned in annoyance when she slid into the middle seat. Kids' expression said, "Always in the way." Riley tucked her backpack at her feet and pressed her hands together in her lap. Her shin burned. Her throat burned worse. The plane door closed with a solid thud. The intercom crackled. Cabin crew, prepare for departure. Riley stared at the seat in front of her, at a faint scratch on the plastic tray table. Her eyes felt hot, but she refused to let the tears fall. Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about choosing when you let yourself break. Not here. Not now. Not because of her. She lifted her wrist and glanced at the smartwatch her mother once wore, Sentinel. It reflected the cabin lights with a soft blue glow. Her mother's voice echoed in her head like a memory wrapped in cotton. "If the world refuses to see you, baby, at least see yourself clearly." The plane began to taxi. Riley's pulse steadied. She sat up a little straighter. Somewhere behind her, a teen's live stream continued, climbing in view count fast, faster than anyone on that plane knew. Thousands of strangers were watching the moment that would change everything. The moment a little girl sat quietly in seat 32B with blood on her sock and dignity in her spine. 5 minutes later, her father would change the entire industry. The hum of the engine settled into a steady vibration beneath Riley's feet, a low, constant thrum she had felt 100 times before on other flights. Normally, it relaxed her. Today, it only made the ache in her shin more noticeable. She kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles turned pale. It wasn't the pain that bothered her most. It was the quiet humiliation, the kind that seeps in slowly, not loud like shouting, but sharp like a paper cut you don't notice until it stings. A child's voice cried somewhere a few rows back. A flight attendant laughed lightly with another passenger up front. Every sound felt far away, as if Riley was hearing them through a thin layer of glass. She stared straight ahead, focusing on the faint scratch on the tray table again. It gave her something to anchor herself to. A warm tear pooled in the corner of her left eye. She blinked it away. Not here, she told herself again. Not now. The man beside her shifted. The scent of whiskey and leftover fast food grease drifted through the air. He didn't look at her, didn't ask anything. But when she moved slightly, he made a soft sound, half annoyance, half disinterest. He was already back asleep. She pulled her legs slightly in toward her seat, careful not to touch his. Her shin pulsed again. The dried blood on her sock stiffened against her skin. She exhaled slowly. Long, quiet. In that moment, she wished her mother were there. Not because she wanted protection. Because she missed the way her mother would hold her hand, not too tight, not too soft, just firm enough to let Riley know she wasn't invisible. Her mother had always been good at that, making Riley feel seen, even when the world wasn't kind enough to look twice. Riley didn't reach for her book. She didn't feel like reading. Instead, she lifted her wrist a little, letting the cabin lights land on the face of the old smartwatch that once belonged to her mother Sentinel. To anyone else, it was just a chunky, outdated prototype, watch not sleek enough, not thin enough. But to Riley, it was a fragment of Evelyn's world, a world of ethics, data, and truth, a world she had tried to fix. Riley let the cool metal press against her skin. The screen lit up softly. A subtle vibration. One word appeared in crisp lettering. Anomaly detected. Her breath caught. The watch wasn't supposed to turn on by itself. Her father once told her Sentinel operated like her mother, quiet until the moment it wasn't. It pays attention, he said. It listens for harm. Riley swallowed. She tapped the screen lightly. A line of text rolled across. Unjust treatment logged. Passenger classified minor. Severity medium. She frowned. Medium, her shin throbbed. But she wasn't angry at Sentinel. She knew her mother had built it to be measured, fair, almost painfully objective. Evelyn believed emotion made judgment cloudy, something Riley struggled to understand at 12. Another line appeared. Additional risk factors detected. Continue monitoring. Riley quietly tilted her wrist away so no one would see. The watch dimmed but stayed awake, a soft pulse at the edges like a heartbeat. She leaned back against the seat. A memory surfaced, one she didn't expect. She was 8, standing in the kitchen while her mother chopped bell peppers for dinner. Riley had come home crying because a teacher accused her of talking back when all she did was correct a math problem the teacher got wrong. Evelyn wiped Riley's tears with her thumb and said, "Baby, some people don't see kids like you as children. They see you as a challenge. That's on them, not you." Riley remembered asking, "So, what do I do?" Her mother smiled gently. "You hold your dignity like a lantern. Not to blind them, not to fight them. Just so you don't get lost in their darkness." Now, 4 years later, sitting in row 32B, with a bleeding leg and a torn boarding pass, Riley held on to those words like a raft. A cabin announcement crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. You may now use approved electronic devices." The man on her right snored softly. The child behind her kicked the seat rhythmically. Riley looked toward the aisle, watching the steady flow of people unbuckling, stretching, adjusting headphones. She caught sight of the older white woman she had noticed earlier, the one who looked shaken by the incident. The woman glanced at Riley for only a second. Their eyes met. The woman looked away, pained. Guilty. Riley wondered what it felt like to be an adult and still not speak when someone was hurt right in front of you. Maybe scary. Maybe awkward. Maybe normal. That was the saddest part. How normal silence seemed to be. She pressed her palm lightly against her shin again, checking the blood. It had slowed, dried around the edges. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a napkin, clean, unused, from a small pouch she kept for emergencies. She folded it carefully and pressed it over the wound. The sting made her inhale sharply. The man next to her stirred, glanced briefly, then turned away. Riley didn't need him to say anything. She didn't expect him to. But part of her wished just a little that someone would have cared enough to ask. The watch on her wrist vibrated again. A new message appeared. Secondary pattern detected. She frowned slightly. What pattern then? A symbol formed, Sentinel's way of informing her that voice input nearby was being logged. She listened. From several rows up, Linda's voice drifted toward the back cabin. "Don't care what that girl said. Some kids need to learn boundaries." Another flight attendant whispered something too soft for Riley to hear. Linda's reply came sharper. "I'm not apologizing for enforcing order. First class isn't a playground." Riley's jaw tightened. Order. That was what adults called it when they wanted to hurt someone without looking cruel. She turned back toward the window. Outside, the sky stretched in a soft blue gradient, clouds drifting like islands. The view usually made her smile. Today, it only deepened the hollow ache she carried. She wondered what her father was doing right now. Marcus Johnson was probably in some boardroom wearing the kind of suit that cost as much as a car, or pacing in front of a giant screen full of charts, or being interviewed about the future of AI. But Riley also knew something else, something no headline ever said. Her father always picked up when she called. Even when he couldn't fix the world, he tried to fix her corner of it. She thought about calling him. She even reached for her phone, but she stopped. She didn't want him to worry yet. He already carried so much company legacy, the weight of being a black man in a corporate world not designed for him. She didn't want to add her bruised shin to his list of burdens. Instead, she whispered to herself, "I'm okay." The words felt fragile, but saying them helped. Sort of. She leaned her head lightly against the seat and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the steady hum of the engine settle into her bones. But then, another vibration, a soft tone. She opened her eyes. The watch displayed a new line. Escalation risk. Increasing. Requesting verification. Are you in danger? Riley's heart fluttered. Was she physically? Maybe not anymore. Emotionally, she wasn't sure. She hesitated, then pressed the small side button, the confirmation button her mother designed years ago. A simple answer appeared. Monitoring continued. Riley exhaled in relief. She didn't know that at that exact moment in a conference room miles away, her father's phone lit up with the same alert. He froze mid-sentence during a presentation, eyes narrowing as he read the notification. But Riley didn't know that. All she knew was the vibration stopped. And for a moment, she let the quiet wrap around her again, heavier than before, but still hers to hold. The plane continued forward through the sky. Nobody looked at her. Nobody asked. But Sentinel was watching. And so was someone else who hadn't seen the whole truth yet, but soon would. Marcus Johnson rarely let anything interrupt a boardroom presentation, especially not when he was standing in the center of his own headquarters in downtown Seattle, surrounded by a dozen executives waiting for his next sentence. His leadership style was calm, deliberate, unmistakably firm. He spoke with the kind of quiet authority that didn't demand the room, it shaped it. But that morning, as he explained a new infrastructure upgrade for his artificial intelligence division, his smartwatch buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time sharper coded. Marcus's voice faltered. He never received that alert. He lifted his wrist. A pale blue icon flashed across the screen, the same icon his late wife had created years ago. Sentinel Alert Classification Shift. Subject, Riley Johnson. Severity updated elevated, requesting parental access. Marcus felt his heart drop, not fast, but slowly, like a heavy stone, slipping deeper and deeper through water. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me a moment." Executives nodded politely, unaware of the small storm forming behind his expression. Marcus stepped away from the table, walking toward the tall windows overlooking the skyline. His reflection stared back at him, tall, poised, wearing the charcoal gray suit his daughter said made him look like a serious superhero. But right now, he didn't feel like a superhero. He tapped the screen. Riley's name appeared again beside a small red indicator. Minor passenger flagged for unjust treatment. Source flight 918 SEA BNA. Adverse event logged at 7:14 a.m. PST. Emotional distress detected. Physical distress detected. Marcus inhaled sharply. Physical distress. He pressed another icon. The watch synced with Sentinel Evelyn's system, now embedded into his home server, linked to Riley's copy. A short text log populated. Passenger forcibly redirected to back cabin. Unverified physical contact detected. Emotional suppression observed. Risk threshold rising. Marcus's jaw tightened, muscles shifting beneath his skin. He didn't blink. Did someone hurt his daughter? He tapped to expand the log and froze. A blurry still frame appeared, captured from a passenger's live stream, automatically detected by Sentinel's media recognition system. It showed Riley, small and quiet, clutching her backpack as she limped down the aisle, her socks stained with red. Marcus's breath left him at once. For a long moment, he didn't move. Couldn't. He was rarely speechless. But seeing his child, his baby girl, bleeding alone in the middle of a crowded plane, something inside him cracked. A voice behind him spoke gently. "Marcus, everything all right?" It was Daniel Lee, his COO, a longtime colleague and his closest friend. Marcus didn't answer. Not at first. He only turned the watch so Daniel could see. Daniel's expression shifted instantly. "Oh God," he whispered. "Is that Riley?" Marcus nodded once. "She's hurt." Marcus whispered, his voice deep but trembling beneath the surface. "And no one helped her." Daniel swallowed. "What do you want to do?" Marcus didn't hesitate. His voice returned steady, sharp. "I want real-time access to Sentinel's feed. And I want a security link with the airline. Right now." Daniel nodded. "I'll get IT." But Marcus raised a hand. "No, I'll handle this myself." Because this wasn't business. This was personal. He walked toward his office, the private one at the end of the corridor, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was thick, electric. Marcus slipped out of his blazer, laid it over the chair, and rolled up his sleeves. Not because he was angry, because he needed space to breathe. He activated his console, Evelyn's old design, her fingerprints still metaphorically in the architecture. The machine hummed to life. Lines of data scrolled. He tapped into Sentinel's shared Guardian mode. A soft tone played. Parental access granted. Monitoring linked. A digital map of Flight 918 appeared on screen, a simplified floor plan showing cabin sections and seat positions. Riley's seat 32B glowed softly. Marcus zoomed in. A small biometric reading appeared: elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, slight stress spike. He closed his eyes. His daughter wasn't just silent, she was holding everything inside. She always did. Just like him. Another panel opened: Sentinel's analysis log. A new entry blinked. Bias pattern detected in crew behavior. Voice sample flagged: Hail, Linda. Potential discrimination. High probability. Marcus's hands curled into fists. He clicked the audio file. He listened to Linda's voice, cold, dismissive, sharp, with entitlement, as she mocked his child. His jaw locked. Another voice file loaded, automatically retrieved from the plane's open-air audio. "Kids need to learn boundaries. First class isn't a playground. You people always try something." Marcus pressed pause. "You people." He whispered the words, like they were venom. His chest tightened, not with rage, but with something deeper, something older, something he hadn't felt in years. The quiet humiliation he endured growing up. The meetings where he was spoken over. The investors who assumed he wasn't the founder. The board members who complimented his composure like it was shocking. He swallowed hard. The world he thought he had outrun had just kicked his daughter. Literally. He opened one more window: financial routing. A private connection, his personal portfolio, several accounts. One labeled Johnson Capital Holdings Liquidity Reserve. Balance $802,000,000,000. Marcus stared at the number. Then at Riley's photo on the corner of his monitor, her laughing under a cherry tree last spring, her hair in braids, her smile unguarded. Something clicked inside him. Not rage, resolve. Evelyn once told him, "If the world harms our child, we don't raise our voices, we raise the truth." He didn't need to yell. He was going to freeze an empire. A soft double beep sounded. His watch lit again. Incoming message: media detection triggered. Viral incident expanding. Over 20,000 viewers active. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Good," he whispered. He tapped the microphone. "Sentinel, initiate defensive protocol. Begin cross-referencing public content. Flag any recording of Riley Johnson on Flight 918. Sentinel chimed. "Confirmed." Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand along his jaw. He wasn't impulsive. Never had been. Every move he ever made, from his first startup to his last acquisition, had followed a calm, steady rhythm. But this was no longer a negotiation. This was a father protecting his child. He pulled up the airline's corporate directory. He didn't need to look up names. He knew them. He had met some of them at conferences, spoken on panels beside a few, even tried to mentor one or two through nonprofit programs. He selected the CEO's direct line. He didn't call yet. He just hovered there. A knock sounded at his door. Marcus Daniels' voice. "IT's ready to assist if you need." Marcus turned his head slightly. "Thank you, Dan. But I won't be needing them yet." Daniel hesitated. "Should I cancel the meeting?" "Yes," Marcus responded quietly. "For the rest of the day." Daniel understood instantly. "I'll handle it." Marcus faced the screen again. His fingers hovered over the controls. He zoomed into Riley's seat feed. No camera view, but biometric and spatial data. His daughter sat still, too still, her shoulders tight, her spine straight, her silence loud. He whispered to the empty room, "It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's here." Another alert surfaced. Escalation predicted. Crew member approaching seat 32B. Marcus's back straightened. Someone was coming near her again. A new voice file streamed automatically. A woman's voice. Younger than Linda's. She looked injured. "I saw blood on her sock." Marcus leaned closer. This voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't cruel. It was concerned. He breathed out, relieved that someone on that aircraft still had a conscience. Sentinel added another line. Second crew member, Dana Lewis. Empathy indicators detected. Good. She would matter later. He checked the live stream growth again. 48,000 viewers, then 60, then 80. Marcus exhaled, once long and controlled. Not anger, not panic. Focus. Sentinel, he said, prepare global freeze authorization. A soft sound acknowledged. He clicked the CEO's number. Not to ask questions, not to complain, but to warn. The airline had 5 minutes left before an $800 million problem hit them like a storm. And they had no idea it was already too late. Riley didn't know that thousands of miles away, her father was standing in front of a glowing console, preparing to shake an entire airline industry. All she knew was that her leg hurt, and that sitting still made the pain worse. She shifted slightly in her seat, wincing. The dried blood tugged at her skin like it didn't want to let go. The napkin she pressed against her shin was too thin, almost useless. But it was something she could control. A small act of care. A tiny proof she still mattered, even if the rest of the plane didn't see her that way. She looked out the window. The curvature of the earth stretched under the soft morning clouds. It should have been beautiful. Normally, she would have pressed her forehead against the cool plastic and imagined the sky lifting her worries away. But today, the beauty felt distant. Muted. Like someone had turned down the brightness on the world. A soft voice behind her pulled her back. "Excuse me. Are you okay?" Riley blinked. She turned slightly to see the older woman, the one who had looked at her earlier, with a mixture of guilt and regret. The woman leaned forward, her hand resting gently on the headrest. Riley hesitated. She didn't know what to say. She didn't want to cry in front of a stranger. She didn't want pity. Mostly, she didn't want to make trouble for her father. "I'm fine," Riley whispered. The woman's eyes softened. "Sweetheart, you don't look fine." Riley looked back down at her lap. "It's just a scratch." The woman exhaled, a sound filled with sadness. "I should have said something earlier. When it happened, I should have." She shook her head. "I'm sorry." Riley didn't answer. The apology felt too big and too small at the same time. Linda's voice suddenly cut through the cabin like a blade. "Ma'am," she snapped from several rows ahead, "please remain seated and refrain from disturbing other passengers." The woman stiffened. Riley didn't turn, but her pulse quickened. Linda stepped closer down the aisle, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Is there a problem here?" The woman swallowed. "I was just asking if she was okay." "Not your concern," Linda said coldly. "And not your seat section." Riley clenched her hands. The woman sat back slowly, eyes lowered. Linda lingered for a moment, her gaze landing on Riley like a spotlight, harsh, unblinking. "You need to keep to yourself," she murmured just loud enough for Riley to hear. Then she walked away. Riley didn't breathe until she was gone. Her watch vibrated. A soft pulse. She glanced down. Hostile interaction noted. Escalation probability increasing. Parental system synced active. Riley swallowed. Her father was watching now. She didn't know how much he'd seen, but she suddenly felt exposed. Like he could hear every heartbeat, every breath she held in her chest. She whispered, under her breath, "I'm okay, Daddy." The watch vibrated once, almost like a reply. Across the plane, the teenager with the phone raised it again, recording Linda's tone, her posture, her words. He wasn't obvious, but he wasn't subtle either. The number of viewers on his live stream ticked upward again. Then again, the comments flooded in. "That attendant needs to be fired. Is the kid bleeding? Where are her parents? I hope someone finds out who she is. This is discrimination, clear as day." Riley didn't know she had become a symbol, not yet, not until later. For now, she was just a girl trying to make herself small enough to survive the next hour. Up front in the galley, Linda Hale leaned over a service counter, typing furiously on her handheld crew device. Her jaw was tight, her breath quick. Uncooperative minor, she muttered as she typed. Attempted unauthorized seating. Behavioral concern. Recommend gate detainment. She pressed send. The device paused. Then flashed a message she'd never seen before. Report held. FAA review required. Lockout temporary. Linda frowned. What? She hit the button again. Same response. She hit it a third time harder. Nothing. Her breath grew uneven. She grabbed the edge of the counter. What is wrong with this stupid system, Dana Lewis? The younger flight attendant stepped into the galley. Everything okay? No, Linda snapped. The compliance system isn't uploading my report. Dana hesitated, then spoke softly. Maybe it's not supposed to. Linda turned sharply. What does that mean? Dana glanced toward the cabin, toward the rows, where passengers whispered and looked at their phones. I think people saw what happened. They're recording. Linda's face flushed a blotchy red. So, what, she was out of line? Dana held her gaze. She's a child. Linda's lips curled. A child who thinks she belongs in first class. I was just doing my job. People like that. Stop, Dana whispered sharply. Linda froze. Dana rarely raised her voice. She wasn't confrontational. She avoided conflict when she could. But something about this moment, about Riley, made her spine straighten. You crossed a line, Dana said, voice trembling. And whatever happens now, you did it to yourself. For a moment, Linda didn't respond. Then, her voice dropped to a cold whisper. You have no idea who you're talking to. Dana stepped back. Actually, I do. And she walked away. Linda's expression tightened, cracking under pressure like glass under heat. She reached for her device again. But before she could type anything else, a new message flashed. Crew member hail Linda, action logged for ethics review. Do not attempt alteration. Linda's throat tightened. Her blood ran cold. What? What ethics review? Her device buzzed again. She looked down. A second message. Parental monitoring mode active. External authority connected. She didn't understand what it meant, but she understood enough to feel fear. Real fear. Back in row 32B, Riley lifted her hand slightly. She wanted to stretch, move, do something to remind herself she still had agency. She reached into her backpack for the small sketch pad she always carried. Drawing usually calmed her, helped her sort feelings she couldn't say out loud. But when she tried to open it, her hands trembled. She closed it again. Her watch pulsed. Another notification bloomed across the screen. Guardian Sync, external user. Connected Marcus Johnson. Her breath caught. Her father was watching. Not the world. Not the live stream. Not even the airline. Her father. She whispered, voice barely audible, Daddy, don't worry. The watch lit up with a soft message, I'm here. Just 2 words. But they were enough to warm something in her chest that had been cold since the moment Linda kicked her. Riley closed her eyes. For a long moment, she let herself rest. Not sleep, just rest. The kind of rest that feels like someone finally put a hand on your shoulder and told you you're safe. At that same moment, Marcus Johnson stared at the feed on his screen, his pulse steadying but his resolve tightening. He saw the biometric data stabilize. He saw the emotional indicators shift slightly downward. Riley was calming, but not because the plane was safe. Because she was strong. Marcus blinked slowly, breathing through the ache inside him. He opened another panel, one he hadn't touched in a long time. Sentinel Financial Lock Protocol. It required 2 things, his passkey and his wife's old contingency code. A code he memorized years ago but never thought he'd need. He entered the first, then the second. Sentinel confirmed ready. Marcus tapped the mic. Sentinel, prepare to freeze all Johnson Capital Holdings assets across airline-affiliated portfolios. A soft tone, ready to execute. Marcus closed his eyes. He pictured Riley's small frame walking down the aisle. Her torn boarding pass, her bleeding leg, her silence. Then he whispered, execute. And in a split second, $800 million locked simultaneously across 7 financial networks, quietly, instantly, without warning. Linda Hale had kicked the wrong child. The system that protected her company was about to collapse around her like a house of cards. And the storm forming at 35000 feet was just beginning. Riley sat still, her hands resting lightly on her sketch pad as the plane hummed through the sky. Her father's message, "I'm here" still glowed faintly in her mind, warm and steady like a lighthouse in fog. She wasn't magically unhurt. Her shin still throbbed, her chest still tightened at the memory of Linda's glare, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't alone anymore. High above the earth in seat 32B that mattered more than anything. But the calm didn't last long. A murmur began to ripple through the cabin, soft at first, then growing like water creeping under a door. Passengers were leaning closer to their screens, whispering, scrolling, shaking their heads. A mother gasped softly. A businessman muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Riley watched cautiously as one phone after another lit up with the same notification. Her face, her walk down the aisle, the torn boarding pass, the blood on her sock, Linda's voice in the background. Someone had uploaded the live stream clip. It was already going viral. Comments poured in beneath it, fast, angry, relentless. "This is abuse. Fire that attendant. Where's her parent? Unacceptable. Lawsuit incoming. Someone protect that girl." Riley's stomach tightened. She didn't like being seen like this. Not by strangers. Not by thousands of them. The whole world didn't need to know she'd been hurt. She didn't want to be a headline or a cause. She just wanted to go home. A rising buzz scattered through the cabin. Someone in row 20 asked loudly, "Did you see what she did to that kid?" Another passenger answered, "She kicked her, the girl's bleeding." Linda halted mid-stride at the front of the cabin. Her whole body stiffened. She turned slowly, scanning the rows, the whispers, the stares, the phones. Her face palled, then flushed, then tightened into something hard and brittle. She marched back down the aisle, her shoes clicking sharply. Riley's heartbeat quickened. Linda's gaze darted from screen to screen, and then she saw it. Her face on a passenger's phone, captured mid-kick, mid-sneer, mid-wrong. "What is that?" she snapped. The passenger, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, held up his phone without fear. "It's you," he said simply. "Hurting a child." "That's taken out of context," Linda hissed. "Seems pretty clear to me," he replied. Linda's eyes narrowed. She turned toward Riley, like a storm shifting direction. "You," she said sharply. Riley froze. "What did you tell people?" Linda demanded. "What lies are you spreading?" Riley's throat tightened. She hadn't told anyone anything. The teenage boy, the one who'd been recording, stood up abruptly from 2 rows behind Riley. "She didn't say anything," he snapped. "I posted the video." Linda turned on him. "Delete it." "No. That's airline property," she barked. "It's my phone," he said, not raising his voice but steady in a way adults rarely expected from teenagers. "And it shows exactly what you did." Passengers murmured in agreement. A woman added, "I saw it too." "She didn't do anything wrong." Linda's eyes flared. "Stay out of this. We're already in it," another man said. The cabin was shifting. People were no longer silent. Linda pivoted toward Riley again. "Give me your bag." Riley clutched it instinctively against her stomach. "Why need to check it?" Linda snapped. "You may have items you're not supposed to carry up here." Riley's hands shook. "There's nothing." "Give it to me." "No," Riley whispered. Linda leaned closer, lowering her voice, but sharpening it into a knife. "You don't get to say no. Not after the trouble you caused." Riley's breath hitched. Her chest tightened. Her fingers curled around the strap so tightly her knuckles whitened. She didn't speak, couldn't, but she didn't let go either. Before Linda could reach for the bag, a hand gently caught her wrist. Quiet, steady, Dana." "That's enough," Dana said softly. Linda jerked her hand away. "Excuse you." Dana stood straighter than she had all morning. "You're escalating a situation you already mishandled." Riley stared. So did half the cabin. Linda scoffed. "I was doing my job." Dana glanced at Riley's injured leg, then at the viral video still glowing on multiple screens. "Your job doesn't include kicking passengers. Especially children." A ripple of agreement swept through the aisle. Linda's eyes twitched. "You think you're going to take her side?" "I'm taking the truth's side," Dana said, voice barely over a whisper, but stronger than anything Riley had heard all day. For the first time, Riley saw fear flicker across Linda's face. Real fear. Not the defensive kind. Not the irritated kind. The kind that comes from knowing the world is finally watching. Linda opened her mouth to respond, but her crew device buzzed sharply. A flashing banner appeared across the screen. "You are Gent FAA Compliance Hold Crew Member. Hail Linda Status Investigation. Active actions restricted until landing." Dana saw it. Linda saw it. The passengers near them saw it. No, Linda whispered. No, no, no. She tapped the device again. Another message. Attempt to alter logs detected. Access blocked. Then another external authority connected to flight. Dana leaned closer, reading over Linda's shoulder. Her voice lowered. That's federal oversight. Riley felt her pulse quicken. Her father. She knew it instantly. Her father was the external authority. Linda took a step back as if the air itself had shoved her. Riley instinctively looked down at her wrist. Two new words glowed on the watch face. He's here. Her father. Her protector. Her quiet storm. A warmth spread across her chest. Not relief exactly, but something steadier. Something like being held without hands. Minutes later, the cabin continued buzzing with whispers. The teenage boy kept his phone angled down, responding to a flood of comments. The older woman from earlier leaned forward again, her eyes gentle. Honey, she said softly, I just want you to know, you didn't deserve any of this. Riley looked down. She didn't know how to respond to kindness. Not yet. Across the aisle, another passenger said, I hope your parents sue the entire airline. Riley stayed silent. She didn't want her father to fight the world because of her. What she didn't understand was that he already was. At that moment, 35000 feet below at the Nashville FAA Regional Monitoring Center, a piercing alert lit across a wall of screens. Sentinel override logged Flight 918, external financial freeze linked authority holder Marcus A. Johnson. Technicians rushed toward the monitors. A supervisor barked orders. Someone called the director. Another forwarded the alert to Washington. In less than 60 seconds, every upper-level FAA terminal was flashing red. And at the center of it all was one name. Riley Johnson, minor passenger status, high-risk incident. Protected by Sentinel Guardian mode. Back in seat 32, B. Riley felt the plane shift slightly, just turbulence. But every vibration made her leg ache. She winced quietly. Dana noticed. She knelt beside Riley's row, her voice gentle. Sweetheart, can I see your leg? Riley hesitated. I'm okay. I believe you, Dana said softly. But I still need to check. Riley lifted her pant leg slightly, revealing the blood-stained sock and the ugly bruise forming beneath it. Dana inhaled sharply. Oh, honey. She stood quickly. I'll get a first aid kit. Riley nodded, small and shaky. Dana placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, a gesture so gentle it made Riley's throat burn. Then Dana hurried toward the galley. Linda watched from several feet away, her face tight and pale. Passengers glared at her openly now. Some shook their heads. Others whispered about filing complaints. Someone muttered, I hope she gets fired. Linda stood still, her hands trembling. For the first time all morning, her posture wasn't confident. It wasn't controlled. It was collapsing. She looked at Riley, not with anger, but with fear. She finally whispered, barely audible. What? Are you? Riley didn't answer. She didn't need to. She wasn't the frightening thing on this plane. The frightening thing was the truth finally being seen. And 5 minutes from now, the world would see a whole lot more. Because her father wasn't done yet. Not even close. At precisely 7:52 a.m. PST, in the glass-walled office on the 38th floor of Johnson Tech Tower, the last financial lock completed its cycle. Marcus watched the confirmation ripple across his screen like dominoes falling in perfect, devastating order. Funds frozen. $802,000,000,000 status. Irrevocable. Until release by primary holder. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. He wasn't the kind of man who slammed fists on desks or shouted in anger. His temper ran cold, not hot, the kind of cold that came from years of learning how the world treated black ambition. He knew how quickly people dismissed outrage when it came from men who looked like him. So he learned to move quietly, precisely, unforgettably. The airline wouldn't realize what happened yet. These freezes were invisible at the surface, but in less than 15 minutes, automated back-end alerts would hit their financial office like a tidal wave. By then, Marcus planned to be on the phone. He tapped his console again. Sentinel displayed a soft update. Riley Johnson, stress level, elevated, but stabilizing. Protective sync active. Marcus's shoulders loosened by a fraction. He clicked open the cabin biometric map again. His daughter's seat 32B glowed faintly, the heat signature pulsing gently like the beat of her small, resilient heart. He whispered, Stay strong, baby girl. He didn't realize he said it out loud until Daniel returned to the doorway. Marcus Daniel said softly the FAA just sent a ping requesting direct communication. Marcus turned. Already, Daniel nodded. Your freeze triggered their emergency oversight panel. Of course it did. Sentinel was designed to link safety, ethics, and finance. Evelyn had planned it that way. Money moved the world, so she designed a system that listened to what money did before people had the chance to hide behind lies. Marcus rubbed his thumb along the ridge of his jaw. Patch them through, and notify the airline CEO's office. I'm speaking to both. Daniel nodded and disappeared to make the arrangements. Marcus remained still, focused, controlled. But inside him, something wasn't still at all. A small storm swirled fear, love, memory, and something sharper. He thought of Evelyn. He thought of the day she handed him the first prototype of Sentinel and said, "This isn't for my career. It's for our daughter." He thought of the nights she spent fighting systems no one wanted to change. He thought of the mornings she never came home. And now her daughter was up in the sky, bleeding quietly from a wound caused by the same cruelty Evelyn had spent her life trying to expose. He inhaled once. Then he straightened his shoulders. "Sentinel," he said calmly, "open a channel to FA Ethics Division." The screen blinked. "Channel ready." A face appeared. Director Amelia Grant, sharp-eyed, silver hair, pulled into a low bun posture, straight as a steel beam. She didn't waste time. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "I assume you're aware your system has triggered a federal cascade." Marcus nodded. "I am." "Are you the one who activated Guardian Financial Override?" "I am." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you understand the scale of what you've done?" "Yes." "A beat. And I'll do it again if necessary." Grant exhaled. Long, slow, measured. "Your daughter is safe for the moment. But the situation is volatile. We're receiving multiple passenger statements, all consistent. The crew member Linda Hale has 2 prior internal flags for discriminatory behavior." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Grant continued. "The FAA is initiating a formal ethics intervention upon landing. But we need you to coordinate with us rather than escalate further." Marcus leaned slightly toward the screen. "Director Grant, I will cooperate fully. I want accountability, not chaos." "And the financial freeze?" she asked. "Stays," Marcus said, "until I receive written confirmation that my daughter will be met by federal ethics officers, not airline security, and that the responsible crew member is immediately suspended pending investigation." Grant didn't argue. The way he said it left no room for negotiation. "I can confirm that," she replied. "We'll send the documents shortly." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Grant gave a small nod of respect before disconnecting. The moment the screen dimmed, another alert popped up. "Incoming call, Curtis Langford, CEO of Skyreach Airlines." Marcus's lips curved into something that wasn't a smile. "Good," he murmured. "Let's talk." He pressed accept. Meanwhile, high above the clouds, Riley sat with her hands folded in her lap as Dana returned with a first aid kit. The younger flight attendant knelt gently beside her seat, opening antiseptic wipes and a small bandage. "Sweetheart," Dana said softly, "this might sting, okay?" Riley nodded. When the antiseptic touched her skin, Riley bit the inside of her cheek to avoid flinching. Dana worked carefully, not rushed, not rough. "You're doing great," Dana murmured. Riley swallowed. "Thank you." Dana smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have been hurt in the first place." Riley didn't know how to respond to that. Passengers nearby watched closely, some with concern, others with quiet fury on her behalf. The energy in the cabin had changed. The silence that once protected Linda was cracking. People were no longer pretending not to see, and Linda knew it. She stood rigid at the front of the aisle, her posture stiff, her eyes flicking nervously toward Riley. Every few seconds she tapped her crew device like she needed it to save her. But every tap produced the same message: ACCESS restricted. She muttered under her breath, "This isn't happening." Her legs felt weak. Her breath came shallow and fast. She was losing control of the cabin, something she'd prided herself on for years. But worse than that, she was losing the silence that always shielded her behavior. Riley's watch vibrated softly. A new message appeared. External connection established. Father engaged. Riley's chest loosened a little. Back on the ground, the airline CEO's face appeared on Marcus's screen. Curtis Langford looked like he'd aged a decade in 5 minutes. His tie was crooked. His voice shook even though he tried to hide it. "Marcus," he said quickly, "let's discuss this calmly." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Your employee physically assaulted my daughter." Langford blinked rapidly. "We're still reviewing the situation." "You don't need to review anything," Marcus said, voice low but razor sharp. "There are multiple videos, passenger statements, FAA logs, and the internal ethics record your company tried to bury." Langford visibly flinched. Marcus continued, "This is a simple conversation. You won't talk around it, minimize it, or frame it as a misunderstanding." Langford swallowed. "We take these allegations very seriously." Marcus cut him off. "Director Grant already informed me the FAA is taking control. I expect your full compliance." "Of course," Langford replied. And Marcus said slowly, "You will make a public statement before Flight 918 lands. A real apology, not a press template." Langford hesitated. Marcus leaned forward, voice dropping into a deeper register that carried the weight of a man who had built empires from dust. "I froze $800 million this morning." Langford's lips parted in shock. "If you think I won't hold your entire company accountable," Marcus said, "you're mistaken." The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Langford nodded. "You'll have your statement." Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. The call ended, and in the sky, the turbulence shifted a gentle jolt. It felt like a warning, or a beginning. Back on Flight 918, Dana finished wrapping Riley's bandage. "There," she said softly. "Does that feel better?" A little, Riley whispered. Dana stood, but kept her expression calm so Riley wouldn't worry. Inside, she was furious. But she channeled it quietly. Not like Linda. Not like the world expected from women who looked like her. As she stepped back toward the galley, several passengers nodded at her silent gratitude for standing up earlier. Dana wasn't used to being seen. Not like this. When she reached the galley, Linda confronted her in a harsh whisper. "What are you doing?" Linda hissed. "You're making this worse." Dana stared at her. "No," she said softly. "You did." Linda's eyes widened. Dana added, "And whatever comes next, you earned it." Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her device buzzed. She looked down. A new message. "Crew member hail Linda pending grounded status. Authorities will meet Flight 918 upon landing." The color drained from her face. Riley didn't see any of this. She just felt the cabin shift, like someone had lifted a heavy blanket from everyone's shoulders. It wasn't safety exactly, but it was the beginning of it. And far below on the ground, her father was making sure the ending to this flight would not be quiet, not this time. For a few quiet minutes, the cabin of Flight 918 seemed to float in a strange stillness, an in-between space where no one quite knew what to expect next. Passengers exchanged looks. Screens glowed with the viral clip. Whispered conversations rolled softly from row to row like low waves on a restless ocean. Everyone felt something building, something bigger than one flight attendant's cruelty, something heavier than the humiliation one child endured, something that had been ignored too many times in too many places. Riley didn't know any of that. She only knew her shin throbbed, and the air in the cabin felt thicker than before, as if everyone were waiting for a storm to break. She sat quietly, fingers tracing the edge of her sketchpad, though she hadn't opened it. She wasn't ready to draw yet. Her thoughts were tangled heavy. The cabin lights flickered slightly, just enough to catch her attention. Her watch vibrated once. A soft message glowed on the screen. Guardian Sync confirmed. External oversight expanding. She didn't know what that meant, but she felt a strange mixture of comfort and dread. Comfort because her father was connected. Dread because the world rarely stayed quiet when her father moved. Then, a sudden voice on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reeves speaking. Please remain seated as we address a developing in-flight matter." The cabin stilled instantly. Riley's pulse quickened. She looked up at the ceiling, as if she could see the captain through the speaker. "In accordance with FAA guidance," the captain continued, "we are currently under extended review protocol. Please understand that certain crew operations may be temporarily restricted. We appreciate your cooperation." Extended review protocol. Dana froze mid-step near row 27. Linda's face went ghost white. Passengers murmured, "What's that mean? Something big is happening. Is this about the kid?" "It has to be." Riley pulled her knees in slightly. Her throat tightened. She didn't want to be the reason the plane felt like a ticking clock. She whispered under her breath, "I'm sorry." A voice came gently from beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong." It was the older woman again, leaning forward with quiet certainty. Her eyes weren't soft with pity this time, they were sharp with conviction. Before Riley could answer the teenage boy, the live streamer stood up halfway from his seat adjusting his phone. "Guys," he whispered to his viewers, "I think the FAA stepped in. Something's happening for real now." The viewer count spiked on his screen. Riley glanced at him nervously. He looked at her, not with curiosity, but with seriousness far beyond his years. "I'm not posting anything else without your say," he murmured. "People are watching, but I don't want to make this worse for you." Riley blinked. "Thank you." He nodded once, respectfully. A small, fragile feeling warmed her chest. A reminder that not everyone in the world looked away. At the front of the cabin, Linda clutched her crew device like a lifeline. Her fingers trembled visibly now. She tapped frantically. Nothing changed. She tapped harder. Another error flashed. "All actions logged. Do not attempt override." Her throat constricted. She looked up and noticed at least 7 passengers staring at her. Not just watching, judging, condemning, waiting. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. Accountability. Dana approached quietly, hands folded in front of her. Riley could see her from the corner of her eye. "Linda," Dana whispered, "maybe you should sit down." Linda shook her head. "I haven't done anything wrong." A nearby passenger scoffed loudly. Another muttered, "Unbelievable." Someone else said, "We all saw the kick." Linda flinched at the word. Kick. A small word that now felt enormous. Dana exhaled softly. "Linda, people are scared, angry." And no, Linda snapped. "They're turning on me because the kid's father is rich or powerful or whatever. This is unfair. This is discrimination against me." The cabin erupted in a chorus of disbelief. "What? You hurt a child? You're unbelievable. You kicked her. And you're the victim." Riley shrank into her seat, heart hammering. She didn't want this. She didn't want people shouting. Dana raised her hand slightly. "Everyone, please." But the passengers weren't listening, and Linda wasn't stopping. She marched down the aisle straight toward Riley. Riley's breath caught. Dana lunged forward. Linda stopped. But Linda was already leaning in toward Riley's row, her voice dropping into a low, trembling hiss. "You know what you're doing. You're ruining my life. All because you." Before she could finish, a voice boomed across the cabin. "Ma'am, step away from the child." It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud in volume, but it thundered with a force that made the entire cabin turn. It came from a passenger in business attire, tall, broad-shouldered mid-50s, seated several rows ahead. He stood fully, now jaw clenched. "I watched the whole thing," he said. "She never raised her voice at you. She never argued. She never even cried. And you're still coming after her." Linda froze. Dana moved quickly, stepping between Linda and the passenger. "Sir, thank you. But please remain in your seat." He didn't sit. He looked around at the cabin, raising his voice. "We're witnesses," he said firmly. "And when federal agents board this flight, we'll make sure they know exactly what we saw." Passengers nodded. Some clapped. Some murmured yes, or absolutely, or "she deserves justice." Riley's eyes widened. She didn't expect any of this. Her watch vibrated again. She lifted her wrist slightly. Pattern shift detected. Environmental support increasing. She didn't know what environmental support meant, but she felt it. The cabin wasn't cold anymore. The world wasn't silent. People were finally standing up. For her. Meanwhile, on the ground, the auto-generated alert system in Skyreach Airlines headquarters erupted like fireworks. Screens flashed with red banners. Executives scrambled. Phones rang nonstop. "What do you mean 800 million is frozen? Who triggered AA supervision? What is Sentinel? How is this related to one passenger?" Financial analyst typed frantically. Lawyers shouted. One director fainted. Another threw up. But none of them could undo what had already been set in motion. Marcus Johnson had acted, and the world was reacting. On Flight 918, Dana gently moved to Riley's side. "Sweetheart," she murmured, "are you okay?" Riley nodded, but her eyes glistened. Not from fear. From something like relief. Dana exhaled softly. "It's going to be okay." Riley whispered, "People are yelling because of me." "No," Dana said, kneeling again so her eyes met Riley's. "They're yelling because someone hurt you. That's different." Riley bit her lip. "I don't want anyone to get hurt." Dana rested a gentle hand on Riley's shoulder. "Wanting kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you good." Something inside Riley cracked, opened some small, rigid piece of her that had been clenched since the moment Linda kicked her. Dana stood again. She turned to Linda and said calmly, "You need to go to the jump seat." Linda's jaw quivered. "I'm not, now," Dana said softly. This time the entire cabin backed her, and Linda finally sat down. Not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. The balance of power had shifted. Not through force, through truth. Riley felt her watch vibrate again. She looked down at the screen. Stability rising. Impact phase approaching. She didn't know what impact phase meant, but the plane felt different now. Heavier, brighter, ready. As if the air itself knew that something huge, something irreversible, was about to happen the moment they touched the ground. Captain Reeves' voice returned over the intercom, steady, but carrying a weight the passengers couldn't ignore. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent into Nashville, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We have been instructed to follow an extended arrival protocol. Upon landing, please remain seated until federal personnel complete their entry procedures." Extended arrival protocol. Dana glanced upward, eyes widening slightly. Linda's face drained completely of color. Passengers exchanged anxious looks. Riley felt her heart skip. She wasn't sure if the plane felt heavier, or if it was just her chest tightening again. She pressed her fingertips lightly against her mother's watch. It vibrated softly. Descent phase initiated. Impact event approaching. She whispered to herself. "What does that mean?" The older woman behind her murmured reassuringly. "It means the grown-ups have to answer for what they did, sweetheart. Not you." Riley felt the words land somewhere deep, somewhere she didn't expect. Slow, careful justice. The kind her father believed in. The kind her mother wished the world had more of. Up front, Linda unbuckled her jump seat belt with trembling fingers. "Dana," she hissed, "they can't do this. They can't just walk onto the plane and haul me off." Dana swallowed. "They're not hauling you off, Linda. They're investigating." "It's the same thing," Linda said, voice cracking. "That man, whoever he is, he's pulling strings. This isn't fair." Dana held her gaze. "Fairness is exactly what's happening." Linda's lip quivered with anger and fear. "You don't understand. This kind of thing sticks. If they put a mark on my record, if they say I'm unsafe, my career, I've been doing this for 14 years. Dana said nothing. She simply looked toward Riley. "And she's 12, Dana whispered. Linda turned away sharply, her breathing uneven. Passengers didn't try to hide their stares anymore. Some glared openly. Others whispered harsh judgments. A couple filmed discreetly, not for entertainment, but so truth couldn't be twisted later. Linda felt every glance like a small burn. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be outnumbered by truth. Not lies, truth. The same truth she had ignored when she kicked a quiet child who only wanted to sit where her ticket said she belonged. At 36000 feet below, the Nashville runway glimmered in the distance, still touched by early morning light. Inside the cockpit, Captain Reeves spoke quietly to his first officer. "FAA wants the door held until their agents are on the jet bridge." The first officer nodded. "And the crew? Only one is flagged." Reeves' voice tightened. "You saw the footage." The first officer nodded again. "Yeah, it's bad." Reeves exhaled through his nose. "We'll follow protocol." Back in the cabin, seatbelt signs illuminated. Passengers settled. Riley sat upright, small hands gripping her sketchpad again. Dana returned to her side for the third time, kneeling gently. "We're landing soon," she murmured. "How's your leg feeling?" Riley hesitated. "It still hurts." Dana nodded slowly. "I figured. A nurse will check on you once we're on the ground." Riley's eyebrows lifted. "A nurse, yes," Dana said softly. "They're here for you." For a moment, Riley felt her face warm, not from embarrassment, but from something quieter, something like being cared for. Dana added, "You're doing incredibly well." Riley swallowed. "I don't feel like I am." Dana shook her head. "Strength isn't something you feel in the moment. It's something other people see in you." Riley blinked back, a sudden sting in her eyes. Dana reached into her pocket, pulled a small wipe, and placed it gently into Riley's hand. "Just in case," she whispered. Riley nodded. Dana stood. The cabin dimmed into landing mode. Meanwhile, thousands of feet below, Marcus Johnson stood beside his office window as the FAA document arrived in his inbox. The confirmation was clear: Federal Ethics Team en route to Gate C-12. Subject: Riley Johnson, protected minor. Crew member under immediate suspension review, Linda Hale. He exhaled. Not with relief. Not yet. He lifted his watch. Sentinel maintain full sync until the doors open, a soft tone replied. Confirmed. Another alert appeared: media escalation, national traction. Trending across 24 platforms. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. He hadn't asked for the world to look, but now that they were, he would ensure they learned something. Not outrage. Not chaos. Truth. The kind Evelyn believed changed systems. He stepped toward his desk and picked up his blazer, sliding it back on with deliberate calm. When Riley stepped off that plane, he would be there. Unshakable. Immovable. Exactly the father she believed he was. The plane dipped. The cabin rattled slightly. Riley's stomach fluttered with the familiar drop. Normally, she loved landings. They reminded her of roller coasters. Today, they reminded her of falling. The wheels touched down with a soft but firm thud. Passengers exhaled. Some clapped instinctively. The engines roared in reverse, slowing the aircraft down the runway. Riley pressed a hand gently over her bandaged shin. The vibration stung a little. Dana stayed close to her position, near row 30, watching. Linda cautiously ready to intervene if needed. The plane slowed to a roll, then finally stopped. The intercom crackled once again. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Do not stand or retrieve bags until instructed. We will be awaiting clearance from federal authorities before opening the cabin door. The words flowed calmly, but the cabin tensed with anticipation. Riley sat straighter. Linda sank deeper into her jump seat, her hands shaking. The teenage boy whispered into his phone. "This is it. They're boarding any second." The older woman whispered to Riley. "When we get off, I'll be giving a statement for you. I promise." Riley nodded softly. She didn't know how many people had decided to stand for her today. She only knew she wasn't invisible anymore. Her watch vibrated gently. She looked down. Impact event imminent. Her breath caught. Then, there was a loud knock at the front door of the aircraft. Firm. Official. Not polite. Dana's pulse jumped. Passengers leaned forward. Captain Reeves opened the internal communicator near the cockpit door. Yes, through the metal, a calm voice answered. FAA Ethics and Compliance Division. Open the cabin door. A hush fell so deep the air felt thick. Riley's small hands tightened around her sketchpad. Linda shook uncontrollably. This is insane. They can't do this. They can't." But Dana didn't comfort her. No one did. With a soft mechanical hiss, the cabin door opened. Bright light flooded the front of the plane. 3 federal agents stepped aboard, no shouting. No dramatic gestures. Just quiet authority. Their eyes scanned the cabin. One agent, a woman with tightly braided hair, held a tablet. She spoke clearly. "We are here for minor passenger Riley Johnson." Riley froze. She didn't expect them to say her name first. Passengers looked toward her row. Dana immediately stepped forward. "She's here. I'll escort you." The agent nodded. "And we are also here for crew member Linda Hale," she added, turning toward the jump seat. Linda gasped, pressing her back against the wall. "No, please wait. This is being blown out of proportion." "I didn't." The lead agent raised a hand. "Miss Hale, please remain calm. You are not under arrest. You are being escorted for questioning." Passengers murmured. Riley held her breath. The tension coiled tighter. But then Dana stepped aside, allowing the agents to approach Riley first. Not Linda. Riley stared up at them, her heart pounding. The female agent knelt to Riley's eye level. Her voice softened, almost motherly. "Hi, sweetheart. We're here for you. Are you hurt?" Riley nodded once, small but brave. Dana rested a gentle hand on Riley's shoulder. The agent continued. "Your father is waiting for you at the gate." Something inside Riley broke open quietly, beautifully. She whispered, barely audible. "Daddy." The agent smiled kindly. "Let's go see him." Riley took a shaky breath. For the first time since boarding the plane, she felt safe. Not because the world was fair, not because justice was perfect, but because she wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. As the agent stood to escort Riley out, the entire cabin watched in silence. Linda lowered her head, and the world as she knew it began to crumble. Riley stepped into the jet bridge, surrounded by a quiet wall of federal protection. Two agents walked ahead of her, two behind her, and Dana stayed close enough to offer comfort without intruding on the authority surrounding the moment. The air inside the bridge felt colder than the cabin, sterile, humming faintly with the echo of airport machinery. Riley's sneakers tapped softly against the floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she kept moving. The female agent from earlier slowed her pace to match Riley's tiny stride. "You're doing well," she murmured. Riley said nothing. Her hand was wrapped around her mother's watch so tightly her fingers trembled. The agent noticed. "Is that your mom's?" Riley nodded once. "Well," the agent said gently, "she'd be very proud of you right now." Riley swallowed. "It doesn't feel like something to be proud of." The agent smiled sadly. "That's exactly how bravery feels." Riley blinked at that slowly, as if the words needed a moment to find their place inside her chest. Dana reached out and squeezed Riley's shoulder lightly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Support doesn't always need a sentence. Together, they emerged from the jet bridge into the terminal. The world exploded in flashes. Camera shutters snapped in rapid bursts. Dozens of reporters pressed behind barricades, microphones stretched out like reaching hands. Security officers held the line, firmly shouting for space. A chorus rose. "Is this the girl? What happened on that flight? Is her father really freezing? $800 million in contracts. Does she want to make a statement? Is she injured? Did the airline try to cover it up?" Riley flinched instinctively and took a step back. Instantly, Dana placed a warm palm between Riley's shoulder blades. "It's okay. You're not alone." The lead agent lifted a hand. The reporters fell silent, not out of respect, but out of fear of losing their access. A line of federal officers parted to create a path through the noise. At the end of that path stood Marcus Johnson, not in his perfectly tailored CEO suits, not with his boardroom armor, just a father. His blazer had been left open, tie loosened, like he'd rushed out the door the moment he heard her name. His eyes locked onto Riley the second she appeared, and something inside him broke, then reformed into steel. Riley felt her legs move before her mind caught up. "Daddy." Marcus moved faster. He dropped to his knees right there on the polished airport floor, ignoring cameras, ignoring the tremble in his own hands. Riley collided into him, and he wrapped both arms around her with a strength that felt like home. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. "I'm right here, baby." Riley buried her face into his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she choked. Marcus pulled back, immediately cupping her face. "No, no, Riley. You don't apologize. Not for existing. Not for living. Not ever." Her lip quivered. "She kicked me, and they moved me to the back, and she said I didn't belong there." Marcus shut his eyes for a split second. When he opened them, they burned. "I know," he said softly. "And I promise you nobody gets to decide where you belong." Riley leaned into him again, small hands clutching the fabric of his jacket. The world kept flashing around them, headlines forming already, but Marcus didn't care. He lifted her gently, carrying her in his arms as if she were 5 again. The agent stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson," the lead agent said, "there is a private room prepared for your daughter. A nurse is waiting to examine her leg." Marcus nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked, reporters erupted again. "Mr. Johnson, is it true you've frozen all current contracts? Are you filing charges? Is the airline facing a civil action? Will you comment on the ethics division's involvement?" "Riley, do you want to say anything?" Marcus turned, gaze sharp as a four-armed blade. "My daughter speaks when she chooses," he said calmly, voice carrying like a command. "And today, the world can wait. No shouting, no fury, just truth." And that silence hit harder than any speech. Inside the private FAA room, the noise disappeared. The small space smelled faintly of sanitizer and coffee. Soft lighting warmed the corners. A medical cot sat in the center, surrounded by equipment. A nurse stepped forward. She was middle-aged, warm-eyed, with brown skin and a calm presence that reminded Riley of her grandmother. "Hi there, sweetheart," she said. "May I take a look at your leg?" Riley hesitated, glancing at Marcus. He nodded. I'll be right here. The nurse guided Riley onto the cot. Dana stayed in the doorway, unsure she belonged in this moment, but unwilling to leave completely. The nurse knelt and peeled back the makeshift bandage. Her face tightened. This wasn't an accident. Marcus's jaw flexed. No, it wasn't. The nurse cleaned the cut gently. Riley winced, but the nurse murmured quietly, soothingly until the pain dulled. This will bruise for a few days, the nurse said. But you're going to heal just fine. Riley nodded. Marcus brushed her hair aside. You're stronger than you know. Riley looked up at him. Am I? Marcus smiled, not the CEO. Smile, not the strategic smile. The real one. The one reserved for quiet kitchen mornings and bedtime stories. Yes, he said softly. You are. A knock sounded on the door. An FAA supervisor stepped in. His tone was respectful, his posture straight. Mr. Johnson. Miss Lewis. We need to debrief you both in separate rooms. Dana tensed. Marcus stood, letting Riley's hand slip gently from his. What about Linda Hale? He asked. She is in custody for questioning, the supervisor replied. Her crew badge has been confiscated. She has been temporarily grounded pending the investigation. Marcus nodded once. But the supervisor wasn't finished. He added quietly. There is something else you should know. Witness statements from multiple passengers match your daughter's account. The teen's video was submitted to our office officially, and Sentinel registered an emergency alert triggered from your daughter's watch. Dana's eyes widened. Sentinel. You mean, yes, the supervisor confirmed. The watch logged a discriminatory event and pushed an automatic report. Marcus's voice deepened. Then, this case will be handled properly. The supervisor nodded. Yes, sir. It will. Riley watched them talk, absorbing their words with the solemn seriousness of someone who had been forced to grow up in the span of a single flight. Dad, she called softly. Marcus turned. Riley held out her hand. And for a heartbeat, Marcus didn't move. Because that tiny gesture, small fingers reaching for him, felt like forgiveness. Felt like trust. Felt like the kind of moment parents remember long after the world stops caring about headlines. He took her hand immediately. I'm not leaving you, he said. I know, she whispered. A long pause. Then I was scared. Marcus knelt again, lowering himself to her height. So was I, he admitted. But you didn't let fear make you small. That's what courage is. Riley breathed slowly, then let go of his hand just enough to wrap her arms around his neck again. Marcus closed his eyes. In that quiet embrace, all the noise outside faded into irrelevance. Meanwhile, across the terminal, Linda Hale sat alone in a stark holding room. No windows, no distractions, just her reflection in a blackened monitor and the echo of her own breathing. Her hands were shaking. Her mind raced. She replayed every moment, every step down the aisle, every glance, every lie she'd filed, every cruel reflex she'd let become habit, and for the first time she saw herself clearly. Not as the professional she believed she was, but as the person she'd allowed herself to become. A soft knock sounded. An FAA investigator entered, followed by two federal officers. Miss Hale, the investigator said, we need you to walk us through your actions. Carefully. Completely. Linda buried her face in her hands. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered. The investigator's voice remained steady. But it did. Back in the private room, the nurse finished wrapping Riley's shin. You're all set, she said warmly. You handled that like a champ. Riley managed a small smile. Marcus squeezed her hand once more. Ready to talk to the investigators? He asked gently. Riley nodded. But before they left the room, she tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, yes, baby, her voice was tiny. Did I make everything worse? Marcus froze. Then, he knelt again, eyes level with hers. No, he said firmly. You made everything honest. Riley stared at him for a long moment. Then, she nodded slowly, and something inside her settled. The FAA debriefing room was colder than Marcus expected. Bright lights, gray tables, a pair of cameras positioned in the corners. The kind of room designed to strip away theatrics and leave only truth. Riley sat beside him, legs dangling off the chair, her newly bandaged shin resting carefully on a small pillow the nurse had provided. She held her sketchpad like a shield, drawing tiny lines on the corner of the page, just to keep her hands from shaking. Marcus placed a steady hand over hers. We'll answer what we need to answer, he whispered. Nothing more. Nothing less. Riley nodded. Two investigators entered. One was the supervisor from earlier. The other, a woman with short charcoal hair, carried a tablet full of documents. She offered Riley a gentle smile. "Hi, sweetie. I'm Agent Monroe. We're going to ask just a few questions, and you can stop at any time. You're safe here." Riley nodded again, small but composed. Agent Monroe sat across from her. "Can you tell me in your own words what happened when you boarded the plane today?" Riley hesitated. Marcus squeezed her hand once. "Whenever you're ready." She took a breath. "When I got on the plane, I sat in the seat my dad bought for me. It was seat 2A, first class." Her voice wavered only slightly. "And then Miss Hale came. She looked at me like she didn't expect to see me there. She asked for my pass. I gave it to her." Riley swallowed. "And then she told me to stand up. But she didn't wait. She just kicked my leg. Hard." Agent Monroe's expression darkened. "Did she say anything?" "She said I didn't belong there, and she tore my ticket in half." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his features. Agent Monroe continued carefully. "Did you say anything to her? Raise your voice, argue." Riley shook her head. "No, I just stood up. And then she took me to the back. She didn't talk to me again." "But the other passengers?" Riley paused. "Some said I sneaked in, or that I was just trying to get a free seat." A tear slipped down her cheek. Marcus caught it with his thumb before it reached her chin. Agent Monroe softened. "You did nothing wrong, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Riley didn't answer. She just looked down at her drawing again, now a shaky outline of a little girl seated by a window. The supervisor turned to Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, we need to confirm something with you as well." Marcus straightened. "Go ahead. This is the confirmation of the $800 million in ongoing contracts between your corporation and Aero Trust Holdings." The supervisor slid a digital copy across the table. "Are you officially freezing your participation?" Marcus glanced at Riley before answering. "Yes," he said plainly. "Effective immediately." Agent Monroe leaned in. "Are you aware that this action may destabilize several aviation partnerships and prompt formal legal scrutiny?" "I am," Marcus replied. "And I'm prepared for that." There was no threat in his tone, just resolve. The supervisor shifted in his chair. "You're making a historic financial decision based on a single incident." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "This isn't based on one incident. It's based on a lifetime of them." The room fell silent. Marcus continued, voice steady, but lined with steel. "You think this is the first time my daughter has been told she doesn't belong somewhere? You think this is the first time someone in my family has been pushed aside because they didn't expect to see us in the room?" He leaned forward. $800 million is not leverage. It's clarity. It says this time the consequences aren't swept aside. Not when it's my daughter, and not when it's anyone else. Agent Monroe exchanged a look with the supervisor. They had expected anger. They hadn't expected conviction, or love sharpened into purpose. A knock interrupted the moment. Dana peeked and hesitant. "Is this a good time?" The supervisor nodded. "Yes. Miss Lewis, please come in." Dana stepped forward, twisting her hands nervously. She glanced at Riley before speaking. "I gave my statement, and I made sure they knew everything I saw." Riley looked up. "Thank you." Dana blinked rapidly, emotion tightening her throat. "No, honey. Thank you. You made me see things I didn't have the courage to call out before." Marcus regarded her carefully. "Miss Lewis, I appreciate your honesty." Dana nodded. "I'm not proud that I froze the way I did, but I'm done letting silence speak for me." Agent Monroe motioned for her to sit. "Miss Lewis, your testimony is important. Several passengers have submitted matching accounts." Dana clasped her hands. "I know. I wanted Riley to hear that from me." Riley gave a tiny smile. Small, but real. Dana exhaled, relief flickering across her face. Meanwhile, in a separate room down the hall, Linda Hale was unraveling. She sat across from two agents who had replayed the teen's video on loop. Every frame was crisp, every action undeniable. Linda's breathing grew shallow. I just reacted. She looked too young to be there. And the VIP list sometimes kids try." One agent sighed. "Miss Hale, none of that justifies physical force." Linda shook her head repeatedly. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't mean to. But you did, the agent said firmly. Linda felt her throat tighten. Please. I can't lose my job. I can't, this isn't who I am. But even as she said it, she knew deep down that this was exactly the version of herself she'd allowed to bloom. A version shaped by small assumptions, unchecked biases, and countless moments she never questioned. A version of herself she was no longer sure how to defend. Back in Riley's room, the investigators wrapped up the questioning. Riley, Agent Monroe said softly, "You've been brave today. We're filing a formal protection report on your behalf." Riley nodded, her expression subdued. The supervisor added, "We'll escort you to the press quarters soon. We recommend a short statement. You are under no obligation to speak, but it may help redirect media attention." Marcus looked down at his daughter. "It's your choice." Riley breathed slowly. Even making choices felt heavy now. "Can I just say one sentence?" Riley asked quietly. Agent Monroe smiled. "Of course." Riley gripped her sketchpad. "I want to say that no one should be afraid to sit where their ticket says." Agent Monroe blinked, surprised by the simplicity and power of the words. "That's more than enough," she said warmly. Marcus placed his hand gently over the sketchpad. "That's perfect." Another knock sounded. A security officer stepped in. "Mr. Johnson, everything is ready. The press corridor has been cleared, and we've set up a secure exit route." Marcus nodded and turned to Riley. "You ready, baby?" Her small voice returned steady now. "Yes." He reached down, offering his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. She slipped her fingers into his. Together, they stood. Dana stepped back, watching them with quiet admiration. Agent Monroe held the door open. Riley took a deep breath. Marcus squeezed her hand just once. Then they walked out, not as CEO and minor victim, not as a public spectacle, but as father and daughter stepping toward truth, clarity, and whatever came next. The press corridor felt like the center of a storm. Bright lights, thick clusters of microphones, security officers lining the walls. Every major network had a camera already rolling, waiting for Riley and Marcus to step out from the restricted hallway. Riley held Marcus's hand so tightly her fingers hurt. He didn't mind. He understood that sometimes strength lived in grip, not words. Agent Monroe leaned closer. "Remember, you speak only if you want to. We'll end at the moment you're uncomfortable." Riley nodded. Marcus bent slightly to meet her eyes. "Just look at me if it feels too loud." She took a shaky breath. "Okay." The double doors swung open. A wave of sound hit instantly. "Mar. Johnson. Is it true you've halted all aviation investments, Riley? Do you want to tell your side of the story, Mr. Jansen? Are you taking legal action against Era Trust? Is this the beginning of a national civil rights investigation?" Riley tensed. Marcus stepped slightly in front of her, not shielding her completely, but forming a visible barrier between her and the noise. He raised one hand politely, but with authority. The crowd quieted. "Good morning, Marcus," began, voice steady, but carrying the weight of a man who didn't raise his voice unless the moment demanded it. "I will speak briefly. My daughter may speak afterward if she chooses." Dozens of microphones angled forward. Marcus continued. "My daughter, Riley Johnson, boarded a flight this morning with a valid first-class ticket. She was assaulted by a flight attendant, moved without cause, and treated as if she did not belong in a seat her family paid for." A murmur rippled through the press. Riley's fingers tightened around his. "Let me be clear," Marcus said. "This is not about money. It is about dignity. It is about the right of every child, every person to sit in the seat their ticket says without being questioned because of how they look." Camera shutters snapped rapidly. Marcus's voice deepened. "And yes, I have frozen $800 million in ongoing aviation contracts. Not out of anger, but out of responsibility. If a system allows a child to be harmed with no accountability, that system must pause until it remembers its purpose." Riley looked up at him, awed not by his power, but by his clarity. A reporter called out, "Mr. Johnson, what do you hope to accomplish?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Change, not revenge." Another reporter, "Do you support the federal investigation?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Fully." Then he stepped slightly aside. "Now, my daughter would like to say one thing." The microphones lowered to Riley's height automatically. Her small shoulders rose and fell. She felt the room tilt. Then, she remembered her mother's voice. "Find your calm, then step into it." Riley stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first. No one should be afraid to sit where their ticket says. Silence. A deep, reverent silence. Even the reporters didn't dare to break it. And in that breathless stillness, something shifted not just in the terminal, but in the thousands of lives watching through screens across the country. Children, parents, travelers, people who had been shoved aside in subtle ways their whole lives and told to let it go. They heard themselves in her. Marcus placed a hand on her back and guided her gently away from the microphones. As they moved toward the exit, the reporters remained quiet out of something rarely seen in their world: respect. The private SUV waited at the curb, engines humming softly. Two federal escorts stood on either side. As the doors opened, Marcus lifted Riley in carefully. Inside the car, the noise faded. Nashville's rolling morning lights spilled through the windows. Riley leaned her head against the seat, suddenly exhausted. Her leg throbbed beneath the bandage. "You okay?" Marcus asked softly. "I think so," she whispered. Dana, seated behind them in a separate escort car, watched from a distance. She didn't want to intrude, but her heart tugged seeing Riley sink into her father's arms. As Riley closed her eyes, Marcus gently brushed her hair away from her face. "You were perfect," he whispered. "I was scared," she murmured. He pulled her closer. "Courage is doing the right thing even when you're scared." She rested her cheek against his chest. "Daddy, what's going to happen now?" Marcus stared out the window. "Now," he said, "the world decides what it wants to be." Across town, inside a conference room at Aerotrust corporate headquarters, panic erupted. Executives stood around a massive mahogany table screens, filled with live broadcast footage of Marcus and Riley. The CEO, a silver-haired man named Edward Chambers, tightened his grip on his coffee mug until his knuckles whitened. This is catastrophic," an executive stuttered. Another chimed in. "Public sentiment is already shifting. Parents are furious. Civil rights groups are issuing statements. We are being roasted online." Chambers slammed the mug down. "Find out who allowed flight operations to proceed with an employee who had previous complaints. Find out why a child was moved from her seat. Find out." He stopped. The footage replayed Riley's small voice. "No one should be afraid to sit where their ticket says." Even he felt the sting of it. "Shut it off," he said quietly. But no one moved, because even they couldn't look away. Back in the SUV, Riley opened her eyes suddenly. "Daddy, yes, why did everyone listen today?" "They never listen." "Not really." Marcus smiled faintly. "Today, they didn't hear you because you were loud. They heard you because you were true." Riley tilted her head. "Is that enough?" A long pause. Marcus stared forward, voice lower than before. "Sometimes," he said, "the smallest truth is more powerful than the biggest noise." Riley considered that. She wasn't sure she understood fully, but she felt it, and sometimes feelings arrived before understanding. The SUV pulled into the FAA secure facility, a low building with mirrored windows and quiet enforcement. Inside, Riley would finish providing any necessary details, while Marcus would face a policy briefing. They stepped out into the calm morning air. Agent Monroe approached again. "We're almost done," she assured Riley. "Just a few more details. After that, you can go home." Riley nodded. Marcus looked at Monroe. "What happens to the flight attendant?" Monroe kept her tone professional. "She is currently in custody. After reviewing the footage and statements, the Ethics Division will determine whether she faces termination, civil penalties, or federal charges." Riley lowered her gaze. She didn't want anyone to suffer because of her, but she didn't want anyone else to suffer the way she had. Marcus sensed her thoughts. He knelt again. "You're not doing anything to her," he whispered. "She did this to herself." Riley's eyes glistened. "I didn't want her to lose her job." "I know," he said gently, "but actions grow roots. Sometimes those roots have to be dug up for new things to grow." Riley rested her forehead against his shoulder. "I just want it to stop." "It will," he whispered into her hair. "Because you spoke?" Meanwhile, Linda Hale sat alone in a holding room. The investigator returned with a folder. "Miss Hale," he began, "multiple passengers have submitted statements. Video evidence confirms the event. Your employment is being reviewed, and you may face formal charges." Linda's voice cracked. "I made a mistake." The investigator paused. "One mistake does not usually lead to federal involvement. Patterns do." Linda felt the breath leave her chest. Patterns. The prior complaints the investigator clarified. 2 unresolved, 1 dismissed. Similar behaviors. Similar profiles of passengers. Linda covered her face with both hands. Please, please, I didn't mean intent matters. The investigator replied. But so does impact. Linda's shoulders shook. The consequences she once assumed would never find her had arrived, quietly, inevitably exactly as they should. Back at the FAA facility, the final round of questioning ended. Riley leaned into Marcus as they walked toward the exit, exhausted, emotionally drained, but free from the corridor of reporters waiting miles away. As the glass doors opened, morning sunlight washed over them. Riley looked up at her father. Daddy, yes. Is this going to change anything? Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out at the horizon, the wide Nashville skyline, glowing with early gold, the world watching from screens in classrooms and living rooms waiting to see what came next. It already has, he said softly. Riley took his hand again, the weight of the day settling gently on her small shoulders. Good, she whispered. Then together they stepped forward. Not into peace, not yet, but into possibility. The FAA facility quieted as the morning drifted closer to afternoon. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the hallways. Distant murmurs from conference rooms echoed faintly. Riley walked beside Marcus, holding his hand, but leaning more of her weight into him now, as if the day had finally begun to catch up with her. Agent Monroe guided them down the corridor toward a private lounge reserved for families involved in federal investigations. It was a small space, with soft lighting, a couch, and a bowl of untouched granola bars on the table. You can rest here for a bit, Monroe said gently. We're finalizing the case files. Once we officially release you, you're free to go home. Riley nodded. She looked tired, not just physically, but in the quiet, weary way that children shouldn't know so young. Marcus helped her onto the couch. She curled up, clutching her sketch pad against her chest. Monroe hesitated in the doorway. She's holding up remarkably well. Marcus exhaled. She shouldn't have had to. Monroe's eyes softened. No. But her voice will carry farther than she realizes. She closed the door behind her. Silence settled. Riley looked up. Daddy, yeah, baby, she paused. When you said, you froze all that money, did you really freeze all of it? Marcus sat beside her, resting one arm on the back of the couch. Yes. That's a lot of money. It is. And it's not gonna break anything. Marcus let out a soft laugh, not amused but touched. It won't break us. She relaxed slightly and continued drawing small lines on her sketchpad, something she always did when she needed to organize her thoughts. Her hand moved slowly, thoughtfully. Is Miss Hale going to jail? Riley asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. I don't know yet, he replied, but she will be held accountable. Riley rested her chin on her knees. I feel bad for her. Marcus turned to her gently. Feeling bad for someone who hurt you doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, but accountability and compassion can exist at the same time. Riley studied him. You don't hate her? No, Marcus said softly. Hate doesn't build anything. It only destroys. We're choosing a different path. Riley let that sink in, her eyes softening. She closed her sketchpad and leaned against him. Daddy, yes, I want things to be better, not worse. For everyone. Marcus's heart tightened. That's exactly why we're here. He kissed the top of her head gently. In another wing of the facility, Linda Hale sat alone in a different room. Her eyes were red, partly from crying, partly from exhaustion. Her uniform jacket sat rumpled in a corner, and her hair, once tightly pinned, had come loose. She had not been handcuffed, but the gravity of the situation was unmistakable. The investigator returned, holding a thick file. Miss Hale, he began, we've completed the preliminary review. Linda swallowed. And before we discuss consequences, you need to understand the scope. He opened the file. 24 passengers submitted statements. 12 provided video or photos. 8 of those videos clearly capture your interaction with the minor. Linda closed her eyes. The investigator continued. You are facing potential termination, federal ethics violations, civil rights complaints, and possible civil litigation. A tremor ran through her fingers. But we are also considering your cooperation, he added. Your willingness to acknowledge wrongdoing may impact the outcome. Linda wiped her eyes. I don't know how I got here. I didn't used to be like this. The investigator paused. People don't usually become unjust overnight. It happens in small steps, moments they ignore, biases they don't examine, behaviors they justify. Until one day, those choices land them in a room like this. Linda let the words settle, then whispered, "Is it too late for me?" The investigator's voice softened, not pitying but honest. "That depends on what you do next." Meanwhile, back in the lounge, Marcus checked his phone. Hundreds of messages poured in from colleagues, from friends, from advocacy groups, from people he hadn't heard from in years. Journalists requested official statements. Several CEOs reached out, wanting to collaborate on reform initiatives. It was overwhelming, but his first priority was sitting right beside him. Riley rested her head on his shoulder again, her eyes heavy. "Daddy, yes baby. Mom would know what to do." "Right," Marcus swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, she always did." Riley smiled faintly. "I wish she were here." Marcus gently brushed a curl behind her ear. "She is. In everything you do." Riley blinked back tears. "I tried really hard to stay calm, like she would have wanted." Marcus felt his chest tighten again, pride, sadness, love, and grief all tangling together. "You did more than stay calm," he whispered. "You stayed true." Riley closed her eyes, letting his words settle like warm blankets around her. A knock at the door. Agent Monroe stepped back inside. "Mr. Johnson, the ethics board would like a moment with you." "Only you." Marcus frowned. "Is Riley allowed to come?" Monroe shook her head gently. "It's a policy briefing. It shouldn't take long. She'll be safe here." Riley looked up, worried. "You'll come back?" Marcus knelt in front of her. "I'll be right back. I promise." She nodded, gripping his sleeve one more time before letting go. Marcus followed Monroe down the hallway. They entered a secure conference room where 3 ethics board representatives sat around a table. "Mr. Johnson," the chairwoman began, "we want to inform you of the next steps." Marcus took a seat. "Go ahead." "The airline is claiming this incident was caused by a misunderstanding. They're suggesting the flight attendant acted on available data and misidentified your daughter's seat assignment." Marcus's jaw flexed. "And they're asking for leniency." The chairwoman folded her hands. "However, given the evidence, this board does not consider their explanation satisfactory. We are preparing to open a formal national inquiry into discriminatory patterns in cabin crew conduct." Marcus exhaled slowly. "You're saying this goes beyond Riley?" "Yes," the chairwoman confirmed. "Your daughter's case is a catalyst, not an anomaly." Another representative added, "We would also like your input for a proposed passenger equity protocol. This is something your late wife advocated for. We believe it's time." Marcus froze. Evelyn's name rarely came up in official settings. Hearing it again here in a room finally ready to listen felt like something in the universe realigning. "We can provide details later," the chairwoman said gently. "But no, this your daughter's voice may help reshape national aviation ethics." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we'll help." The meeting ended. As he stepped into the hallway, Marcus paused, steadying himself against the wall for a moment. Grief and purpose swirled together, not clashing, but weaving into something both painful and powerful. Evelyn had tried to change the system, and now their daughter would carry that flame forward. When Marcus returned to the lounge, Riley sat quietly, hugging her sketchpad to her chest. "You came back," she said. "Always," he replied, kneeling again to meet her eyes. She smiled, not the bright, carefree smile of earlier years, but a softer, braver one shaped by the morning's trials. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Marcus brushed her hair gently. "Yes, baby. We're done here." Riley slipped her small hand into his. Agent Monroe escorted them toward the exit. As they passed a window, sunshine spilled across Riley's face. She blinked, startled by the brightness, then squinted up at the sky. "I don't like airplanes today," she admitted quietly. Marcus exhaled. "You don't have to. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, either," she added. He smiled softly. "You take all the time you need." Riley leaned her head briefly against his arm. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel like a symbol. She felt tired. But somewhere inside that tiredness was a tiny spark, small, steady, growing slowly like dawn. Justice was heavy, but being heard, being believed, being seen, that was lighter than she expected. As they stepped through the final door of the facility, Marcus glanced down at her. "You know," he said gently, "your sentence this morning. People are repeating it everywhere." Riley blinked. "They are, yes. and I think they needed to hear it. Riley looked down at her shoes. I just said what was true. Marcus smiled. That he said is how change starts. They walked into the sunlight. Together. The drive home was unusually quiet. Not the tense kind of quiet that follows conflict, but a weary, heavy quiet that comes after too many emotions have passed through a small body in a single day. Riley rested against Marcus's side in the SUV, her eyelids fluttering as she fought sleep. Outside, Nashville's afternoon sun cast soft amber light over buildings and passing trees. Marcus watched her in the dim reflection of the car window. Her small shoulders rose and fell with tired breaths. Her arms curled protectively around her sketchpad. She had always been strong, but today she'd been extraordinary. He brushed a thumb against her knuckles. "Daddy," Riley murmured without opening her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are people still talking?" Marcus hesitated. "Yes. A lot of people." Riley turned her face into his arm. "I don't want millions of people looking at me." "I know," he whispered. "And they don't want to look at you. They want to look at what happened." He kissed her forehead gently. "And they want to make sure it won't happen again." Riley's voice softened to a sleepy hum. "Is that good?" "It will be," he said. After a moment, her breathing evened out. She had fallen asleep. The SUV continued forward, leaving behind the noise, the cameras, the reporters, the chaos, and carrying them towards something quieter, something necessary. Home. When they arrived, the house felt different. Not physically, everything was where it belonged. But the energy was softer, as if the walls themselves understood that the little girl who stepped inside had lived a lifetime in a day. Marcus carried Riley in his arms. She didn't stir. He laid her gently on the living room couch, pulling a warm throw blanket over her. Her sketchpad slipped from her hand, and he tucked it safely beside her pillow. He stood there for a while, watching the tiny rise and fall of her breath. His daughter, his courage, his reminder of everything he and Evelyn had fought for. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen. A quiet cup of coffee felt grounding, a ritual that reminded him that life, despite its storms, still had corners of normalcy. As the coffee maker hummed, Marcus leaned his palms against the counter and closed his eyes. He had faced boardrooms full of billionaires. He had navigated corporate crises, mergers, scandals. But nothing compared to the moment he'd watched his daughter walk through that jet bridge, surrounded by federal agents. She had looked so small, and yet she had carried the weight of change on her shoulders. He exhaled slowly. Evelyn would have known what to say now. She always knew how to turn pain into purpose. Marcus opened his eyes and looked toward the family photo on the kitchen shelf. Evelyn, smiling brightly, one hand resting on his shoulder, the other around a toddler-age Riley. "You'd be proud of her," Marcus whispered. "She's more like you every day." His chest squeezed, grief and gratitude intertwined. A soft sound interrupted the quiet. Riley's voice. "Daddy," she called from the living room. Marcus walked over quickly. She'd woken up halfway, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "Hey, baby," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "You should rest." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want to sleep anymore." He brushed her hair. "Okay. Do you want to sit outside on the porch?" Riley nodded. Marcus lifted her again, this time with more gentleness than usual. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her weight familiar and comforting. He stepped out onto the back porch, where the air smelled of cut grass and drifting sunlight. He sat on the porch, swing holding her close. Riley nestled against him, her head beneath his chin. For a long while, they simply swayed. No questions, no explanations, just the soft creak of the swing. Finally, Riley spoke. "Daddy, after today, am I still just me? Or am I something else now?" Marcus stroked her hair thoughtfully. "You're still you, but you're also someone who told the truth when it mattered. That's a rare thing." Riley fidgeted. "People online are loud." "Yes," Marcus acknowledged. "They're calling me brave." "You are. But I didn't feel brave. That's how bravery works." Riley was quiet for a moment. "Do I have to keep being brave?" Marcus paused. "No," he said firmly. "You don't owe bravery to anyone. You just be yourself. That's enough." Riley rested her forehead against his chest. "I don't want to be famous." "You won't be," Marcus assured her. "Not in the way people think. Stories fade. Headlines fade. But the change that comes after that lasts." and it won't demand anything from you. Riley breathed in deeply, letting his words settle in her heart. That evening, as the sky faded to dusky purple, Marcus carried Riley upstairs to her room. He helped her into comfortable clothes, placed her favorite stuffed bear beside her, and dimmed the lights. "Can you stay here until I fall asleep?" she asked. "Of course." Riley touched her mother's watch. "Daddy, is Mom proud of me?" Marcus felt tears threaten. "She is," he whispered. "More than you know." Riley closed her eyes. "Good," she murmured. "Because I was scared." Marcus caressed her forehead. "Everyone who does something important gets scared. Even you, even me." Riley opened her eyes again, studying him carefully. "Were you scared today?" Marcus nodded. "Terrified. But you didn't look scared. I didn't want you to feel alone." A tiny tear escaped Riley's eye. "I'm glad you were there." Marcus leaned down, kissed her cheek, and held her hand lightly until her breathing grew steady again. The house fell into the quiet hum of nighttime. Later in his study, Marcus opened his laptop. Emails flooded his inbox, requests from lawmakers, civil rights leaders, aviation leaders, and ethics councils. The world didn't merely want a statement. It wanted guidance. It wanted structure. It wanted change. But Marcus didn't respond yet. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out Evelyn's old leather notebook, a journal she kept during her years of advocacy. The pages were filled with handwritten ideas, equity protocols, incident tracking systems, crew accountability networks, passenger protection policies. She had tried so hard. She had left so much unfinished. Marcus traced her handwriting with his fingertip. Then he opened a blank page beside hers and began writing, not angrily, not vindictively, but with the clarity of a man who had seen the cost of inaction. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly into the house. Riley padded into the kitchen, wearing her oversized NASA hoodie, hair still tousled from sleep. Marcus smiled. "Morning, baby." Riley climbed onto a stool. "Can we make pancakes?" "Absolutely." As they cooked together, mixing batter, burning the first pancake, laughing quietly, the world felt normal again. Not fully healed, but grounded. Once breakfast ended, Riley sat at the table, flipping open her sketchpad. Marcus noticed new drawings, shaky lines turning into meaningful shapes. Riley tapped the pencil thoughtfully. "Daddy, yes. Do you think what happened to me will help other kids someday?" Marcus met her eyes. "Yes," he said softly. "I do." Riley looked down at her drawing, a simple picture of a girl sitting by an airplane window, sunlight shining through. She colored the sunlight yellow. "Then I'm okay with it," she whispered. Marcus felt something inside him unclench, something that had been tight since the moment she'd whispered, "Daddy, she kicked me on that plane." He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "You're okay," he murmured. "You're more than okay." Riley smiled, small but true. Outside, the world continued to argue and debate and report and dissect. But inside their home, inside the quiet after the storm, there was healing, not all at once, but enough to begin again. There are moments in life that split the world into before and after. Not because they are loud or dramatic or sensational, but because they reveal things we've ignored for too long. Riley's story is one of those moments. It reminds us that dignity is not something earned, it is something every human being deserves without condition. It teaches us that silence, even when comfortable, can slowly erode the walls of justice. And it shows that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it appears in the trembling voice of a child who simply speaks the truth. For older generations who have watched the world change sometimes too slowly, this story echoes something familiar. Many have lived through moments where they were told they didn't belong, couldn't sit there, shouldn't speak up. The ache of being unseen is universal across time. Yet the hope in this story is also universal, the belief that change can begin in the smallest places, even in seat 2A of an ordinary flight. What we can take with us is simple: stand firm in kindness, stand firm in truth, and when life presents a moment to choose between quiet and justice, choose the path your future self will be proud of, because every act of accountability is also an act of healing. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched you even a little, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your presence here means more than you know, and I look forward to telling you more stories that bring hope, empathy, and healing.